The alarm wasn't supposed to sound like that. Derek, the human wildlife specialist with dirt still on his boots from Earth's last Savannah project, stood in the center of the training arena, watching 3 predator cubs tear through reinforced cables like party streamers. Keseth, the reptilian trainer with bronze scales and vertical pupils that had narrowed to slits, had all 4 clawed hands pressed against the observation window above, her forked tongue flicking in what Derek had learned meant absolute terror. "They're supposed to respond to the whistle." Keseth's voice crackled through the intercom, each word punctuated by the sound of another cable snapping. 3 cycles of training. 3 cycles. Derek watched the cubs, each the size of a small lion with spotted fur that shimmered between purple and gold, ricochet off the walls. Their oversized ears pinned back, their 6 legs scrambling for purchase on the smooth arena floor. The smallest one, Xena, had just discovered she could climb the vertical surface and was now hanging upside down from a lighting fixture, her tail whipping back and forth, sending sparks raining down. "Yeah, about that whistle," Derek said, reaching into his jacket pocket. He pulled out a protein bar, unwrapped it with deliberate slowness, and leaned against the wall. Just leaned, nothing fancy. One shoulder against the reinforced steel, ankles crossed, chewing casually while chaos exploded around him. The effect was immediate. Xena's ears swiveled forward, her grip on the light fixture loosened. She dropped to the floor with a heavy thud that shook the arena, then padded over to Derek and sat down. Just sat. Her haunches hit the floor, her tail curled around her 6 paws, and she stared at him with eyes the size of dinner plates. The other 2 cubs froze mid-rampage. One had been in the process of shredding a training dummy. The other had somehow gotten its head stuck in a helmet meant for Vraxen, the insectoid security chief whose compound eyes were currently reflecting the scene in 1,000 tiny, horrified fragments. Both cubs scrambled over each other, a tangle of spotted fur and flailing limbs, racing to sit beside Xena. Within 10 seconds, all 3 cubs sat in a perfect line, staring at Derek, tails twitching in unison. The silence in the training arena was louder than the chaos had been. "What?" Keseth's voice cut out. She pressed all 4 hands against the glass harder, her scales shifting from bronze to a sickly green. "What did you do?" "Leaned," Derek said, taking another bite of his protein bar. "And stopped moving." Vraxen, standing beside Keseth with his black chitinous armor gleaming under the observation deck's blue lights, clicked his mandibles together in rapid succession. "That is not a recognized training technique. Our database contains 17,000 methods across 400 species. Leaning is not among them." "Yeah, well." Derek pushed off from the wall, and immediately all 3 cubs stood up, ears forward, ready to follow. He leaned back against the wall. They sat down again. "Back home, we call this modeling calm behavior. The cubs were stressed. You were yelling. The alarms were going. Everything was stimulus, stimulus, stimulus. So I removed myself from the equation, became the least interesting thing in the room. You are standing in an arena with 3 juvenile Krell predators who have a 97% mortality rate among handlers," Keseth said, her voice rising an octave. Her forked tongue flicked out again, tasting the air through the intercom. "How are you the least interesting thing?" Derek shrugged, which made all 3 cubs tilt their heads in perfect synchronization. "Because I'm not reacting to them. Look, you've been trying to train them like soldiers. March, obey, respond to commands. But they're babies. They don't want commands, they want a mom." Xena made a soft chirping sound, then scooted closer to Derek until her shoulder pressed against his leg. Her fur was surprisingly soft, each strand shifting colors as she moved. The other 2 cubs shuffled over, creating a small pile of spotted alien predator around Derek's boots. "This is unprecedented," Vraxen said, his antennae twitching. "Security protocol demands I report this. No handler has ever achieved non-aggressive proximity with juvenile Krells without sedation or restraints." "Maybe that's your problem." Derek scratched behind Xena's oversized ear, and she leaned into it so hard she nearly knocked him over. "You're trying to control them instead of just being with them." Keseth's scales rippled through several colors, bronze to green to a deep purple that Derek hadn't seen before. "The Council will want to observe this, immediately." She stabbed at a holographic panel with one clawed finger, and within seconds, 3 more aliens materialized on the observation deck through a door that hissed open. Ryloth, the station commander, swept in first, her iridescent feathers catching the blue light and throwing rainbow patterns across the walls. Her sharp beak clicked shut as she folded her large wing arms against her sides, her taloned hands gripping the observation railing. "Explain why I was summoned from a diplomatic emergency to witness someone standing." "He's not standing," Keseth said, her voice tight. "He's revolutionizing our entire predator training program by accident." "By leaning," Fraxon added, mandibles clicking, "against a wall." Ryloth's feathers ruffled, standing on end for a moment before smoothing back down, her head cocked to one side, her sharp eyes, black and unblinking, fixed on the scene below. "I terminated a negotiation with the Helix Confederation because someone is leaning against a wall?" "Watch." Keseth pointed down at the arena. Derek, who had been listening to this entire exchange through the arena's speakers, decided to demonstrate. He stood up straight. All 3 cubs immediately stood, forming a tight group around his legs, ears swiveling in every direction, muscles tensed. He took 3 steps forward. They followed, moving as one unit, their 6 legs coordinating perfectly. He stopped. They stopped. He sat down on the floor, crossing his legs. The cubs sat down facing him in a semicircle, tails curled around their paws, eyes locked on his face. Then Derek did something that made every alien in the observation deck lean forward simultaneously. He lay down on his back, arms behind his head, and closed his eyes. Xena chirped once, then flopped down beside him, her spotted flank pressed against his side. The other 2 cubs climbed over each other to claim spots on his other side and across his legs. Within 30 seconds, Derek was buried under 300 pounds of sleeping predator cubs, their synchronized breathing filling the arena with a sound like distant thunder. "This is impossible," Ryloth said, her feathers standing straight up now, creating a halo of iridescence around her head. Her beak opened and closed twice before she managed words again. "Krells don't sleep in the presence of other species. Their instinct is to remain alert, ready to attack or flee. It's their defining characteristic. It's why we can't domesticate them." "He domesticated them by taking a nap," Fraxon said flatly. Derek's voice drifted up from the arena floor, muffled by alien fur. "I didn't domesticate anything. I just showed them I trusted them. They're pack animals, right? Pack animals need a leader who makes them feel safe. If I'm calm, they're calm. If I'm freaking out, they freak out. It's not complicated." "It is, in fact, extremely complicated," Keseth said, though her scales had shifted back to bronze, which Derek had learned meant she was processing something important. "We've studied Krell behavior for 200 cycles. We've built entire facilities around managing their aggression. We've lost handlers. And you're telling us the solution is trust and leaning," Derek added. "Don't forget the leaning." Xena, apparently having the best dream of her short life, started making small growling sounds, and her paws twitched against Derek's ribs. He reached over and scratched behind her ear again without opening his eyes. The growling turned into purring, a sound that made every alien in the observation deck flinch. "Krells don't purr," Fraxon said, but his voice had lost its certainty. "That sound doesn't exist in our behavioral database." "It does now," Derek said. Ryloth's wing arms suddenly snapped open, spreading wide and casting shadows across the observation deck. Her feathers shimmered from blue to violet to deep crimson. "This changes everything. If humans can calm Krells through passive behavioral modeling, then the applications are." She folded her wings back with a sharp snap. "We've been trying to terraform the northern continent for 15 cycles, but Krell packs prevent any ground team from establishing permanent camps. If your method works on wild adults—" "Whoa, hold on." Derek sat up, which caused all 3 cubs to jolt awake and immediately crowd around him, pressing their bodies against his torso. "I'm not saying this works on adult Krells. These are babies. They're hardwired to imprint on caretakers. Adults are a completely different situation." "But the principle remains," Keseth said, and Derek could hear the wheels turning in her head through the intercom. "You've demonstrated that Krells respond to emotional state projection rather than dominance displays. Our entire approach has been adversarial. We've been trying to show them we're stronger. You're showing them you're safe. Safe. It's also showing them I'm boring," Derek said, which, in this context, is a good thing. They're not performing for me. They're not trying to prove anything. They're just existing around me. He stood up, and the cubs formed their protective triangle around his legs again. Look, I'll work with your team on adapting this for other handlers, but I'm not promising miracles. Some things just take time and patience. Vraxen's mandibles clicked in a pattern Derek had learned to recognize as skepticism. The Council will want proof this is replicable. One human achieving results could be a statistical anomaly. Fine. Derek walked toward the arena exit, the three cubs following so closely they kept bumping into each other, trying to stay near him. Get me 3 more handlers willing to try this, and I'll show them. But they have to actually commit to being calm. No yelling, no power moves, just... The arena door slid open with a hiss, and Derek stepped into the corridor where red emergency lighting cast everything in crimson shadows. The cubs hesitated at the threshold. The corridor was narrow, with industrial pipes running along the ceiling and the walls close enough to feel claustrophobic. Xena whimpered, a sound so small and vulnerable that Keseth made a choking noise through the intercom. Derek crouched down, making himself smaller, and held out his hand. It's okay, just a hallway. Nothing scary. Xena pressed her nose to his palm, then took one tentative step forward. Her spotted fur rippled with colors, purple, gold, silver, as she moved into the red-lit corridor. The other 2 cubs followed, staying close enough to Derek that he could feel their body heat through his jacket. Subject remains calm in transitional space with agitated juveniles, Vraxen narrated into what was apparently a recording device. Cubs demonstrate trust despite environmental stressors. Stop calling them subjects, Derek called back. Their names are Xena, Korvik, and Thessa. Use them. There was a long pause. Then Keseth's voice, quieter now, acknowledged. They made it halfway down the corridor before disaster struck, or at least what Keseth clearly thought was disaster. Another group of aliens rounded the corner ahead, 4 engineers in protective suits carrying equipment that hummed and sparked with blue energy. The moment they saw the cubs, they froze. The cubs immediately shifted into attack posture, ears pinned back, haunches lowered, muscles coiled. Thessa, the largest, opened her mouth to reveal rows of crystalline teeth that reflected the red emergency lights like rubies. Derek didn't move, didn't flinch. He kept his breathing steady and his posture relaxed, one hand resting lightly on Xena's shoulder. Hey, he said to the engineers, his voice conversational. Mind dimming that equipment? The blue light's stressing them out. The lead engineer, a being that looked like a walking collection of geometric crystals, stuttered. We can't just... The power coupling requires... Great, thanks. Derek interrupted, still calm. He turned slightly, positioning himself between the cubs and the engineers, and started walking slowly backward down the corridor. The cubs backed up with him, never taking their eyes off the strangers, but their posture began to soften. Ears came forward slightly, muscles loosened. By the time they reached the next junction, the cubs had relaxed completely, trotting alongside Derek like they'd done this 1,000 times. The engineers stood frozen in the corridor, their equipment still sparking. Their expressions were visible somewhere between awe and confusion. That was the engineering crew, Keseth said through the intercom. They have clearance to be in that corridor. And now they know to dim their equipment around Krells, Derek replied. Everybody learned something new today. They emerged into a larger space, the station's central hub, where multiple corridors intersected beneath a domed ceiling that showed the stars beyond. Dozens of aliens stopped what they were doing to stare at the human casually strolling through their station with 3 predator cubs at his heels. Derek found a bench, sat down, and pulled out another protein bar. The cubs immediately settled around him, Xena claiming her spot pressed against his leg, Korvik lying across his feet, and Thessa sitting upright on his other side like a guardian. So, Derek said, unwrapping the bar. Who wants to talk about long-term behavioral enrichment programs? Because if you're serious about this working, we need to redesign your whole facility. Ryloth's voice came through a nearby speaker, her tone completely different from before. Less commanding, more curious. Her words came with the soft clicking of her beak between phrases. What would you require? For starters, natural light cycles. These cubs are diurnal. They need sunrise and sunset cues. Second, environmental complexity. That training arena is a sensory desert. They need textures, smells, sounds. Third, He paused to scratch behind Xena's ear, which made her lean so hard into his leg that his knee buckled. Third, you need to stop thinking of them as weapons and start thinking of them as kids. Because that's what they are. The intercom crackled with multiple voices talking over each other. Kesith arguing with Raxon, Ryloth issuing orders to someone off-channel, other voices Derek didn't recognize. Through it all, the three cubs dozed peacefully around him, their breathing synchronized, their fur shifting through gentle colors in the starlight from above. Derek finished his protein bar and watched a maintenance drone zip past overhead, its lights briefly illuminating the cub's fur in streaks of blue and white. Xena's ear twitched, but she didn't wake. Korvik made a small snuffling sound and adjusted his position across Derek's feet. Thessa remained alert, her eyes half open, still playing guardian even in rest. "One more thing," Derek said into the nearest speaker, knowing someone was still listening. "These cubs need socialization with each other, not just handlers. They're learning pack dynamics right now. If you isolate them for training, you'll break something fundamental in their development." He gestured to how the three cubs had arranged themselves. Not randomly, but in a deliberate formation with overlapping protection zones. "See how they're positioned? That's instinct. That's pack structure forming. You can't train that. You can only nurture it, or destroy it." Kesith's voice came back, thoughtful now, her earlier panic completely gone. "How long have you been observing this pattern?" "Since the moment they sat down the first time," Derek said. "Xena's the emotional center. She leads with curiosity. Thessa's the protector. She monitors threats. Korvik's the mediator. He watches both of them and adjusts. It's already there. You just haven't been looking at them as individuals operating in a group structure." There was silence on the intercom for several long moments. Then Ryloth's voice, with that distinctive beak-clicking punctuation. "Human Derek, I believe we have significantly underestimated both the Krells and your species' capacity for interspecies behavioral analysis. When can you begin consulting on our broader xenobiology programs?" And Derek the human, who revolutionized an entire alien species approach to predator training by leaning against a wall, took another bite of his protein bar and wondered if anyone had considered that sometimes the simplest solutions were the ones everyone overthought themselves out of trying.